Hey, Dave Seekman, how are you?
Hey, Cal, how are you?
I'm good. I feel like I haven't seen you since like Monday.
It was Monday.
It was Monday.
It was Monday.
Well, we're excited because this is what is it? One, two, three, four of our podcast.
Four.
Um, Confirmed, Dave. By the way, we had 46 viewers of it on YouTube alone.
Excellent.
So people like watching us interact as well, which is pretty darn cool, I think.
Absolutely.
Um, but we're here to bring some value today, obviously. Let's catch up for a few minutes because obviously we've been pretty busy running across the world. I don't like to use the word busy because we've been very productive.
I was going to call you out on that.
You should at all times. So where have you been, Dave? What you been doing this fine month of April?
Let's see. So I was out in Pennsylvania at the end of March. Technically, it wasn't April, but I was in Pennsylvania a couple weeks ago. Really local to Massachusetts during April. Did take a little mini vacation with the family over April vacation, which I know is a unique thing up here in this neck of the woods. Not everyone
True.
has that, but we had a good time there too. And I'm headed out to Florida, to Fort Myers next week. How about you? Where
So,
you been?
well, I got a bigger question. So obviously
Okay.
you've got kids. Easter was on April Fool's Day. Did you totally screw with them?
No, I really wanted to take all the Christmas decorations down and like completely like decorate the house for Christmas
Yeah.
because I thought it would be
Yeah.
funny, but it was not worth the effort. That did not happen.
I don't have kids, but I would say that if I had children on Easter and April Fool's Day, I'd probably scar them for life. So you're a far better person than me.
I mean, it might just be lazy.
I don't know. It's like, how often does it happen?
Right. That's true.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. So,
Sorry, go
uh,
ahead.
no. So I have traveled the Heartland of America.
Yeah.
I did get to go down to Florida, which was awesome. Saw a great agency that's crushing the renewal calls. Launched some renewal calls with our friends at Community. And I know you and I have this thing where there's your community and my community. So
Yeah.
I have a client that's Community Insurance in Wisconsin, and Dave
Yeah.
has a client prospect that's Community. So we always joke, you're Community.
Mine's in Iowa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got to see my good friends at Clevenger, which was super great. So they're one of our case studies. Got to see Hanzel. So for all of you guys who listen to the Agency Nation podcast, Bogus has been on that quite a few times. We did some CSR training. And I got to do something that I really, really love doing, which is working with carriers. So we have a great relationship with Grinnell Mutual in Iowa. And they hire us to come out and do a day of sales training at their commercial academy. So all these great people get trained up on their farm and their commercial programs. And we kind of, at the end, right before they get their certificates, they get sort of a 4-hour sales training from us.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And so we love doing stuff like that with the carriers. So if any carriers listening, happy to do the same thing with you guys. So it's been crazy busy, but we never forget our loyal podcasters. So that's why we want to make sure we get this podcast done, right?
That's twice you've used the word busy.
All right. You know, it's one of my core words. That's the problem.
Yeah, I know. You hear it a lot.
Yes. So if we take a look, one of the plaguing things that happens in insurance, and I think it's a huge time suck, which is a great reason we wrote kind of an ebook on this and we're doing the podcast, but you know, following up with clients is a huge time suck, you know, and I know Dave, you got such great experience, you know, basically running 2 decent sized agencies. When you looked around and saw your team, like how much time do you think they'd spend just having to follow up with people?
Oh, it's really out of control. I think the biggest problem is that I don't think that we give enough reason for people to want to answer the phone. I mean, let's face it, it's insurance, so it's not at the top of the priority list in terms of you know, the day-to-day tasks that clients have. So we end up following up with right from the beginning, even before they're a client, right? We're following up in our new business process, then we're following up to get applications, and then we're just kind of consistently following up. And I think it really stems from that idea that we're not giving enough reason for the clients to call us back.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to ask you what you've seen in agencies in terms of the biggest reasons why people aren't returning the calls.
I'm probably just going to be super blunt with this. No one knows that they exist, right? So it's great. I buy a policy from you 3 years ago. What's the likelihood I remember your name?
Right.
And so, you know, like what's the likelihood to remember your name 30 days later? You know, like that's the challenge. And so as I get my policy from Travelers or Safeco or whoever I have it, I get my EFT taken on my bank account. I see Safeco every month. The agency name just becomes a distant memory. My agent who sold me the policy becomes a distant memory. Unless something happened that was truly magical on that call, the idea that I'm ever going to remember you, it's really not my job to remember you. It's the agency's job to stay present in the customer experience. And when agencies sell a policy and then leave the transaction and only call them, and I'm sure you've seen this, Dave, right? Because you and I have been around through these proactive renewal calls. Clients pick up the phone and say, oh, hi, I made my payment. What are you calling for?
Right, exactly.
So the only time you talk to them is if they haven't made a payment. That's not enhancing, I agree. I think everybody should make late payment calls. Don't get me wrong. I think it's a great thing. And I know every E&O person will be like, don't do it. Oh. I say do it. Yeah, do it. Because it's a great thing to do, but do it well. Like they're saying don't do it if you're going to do a bad job at it. Right?
I agree with you.
I think that's part of it.
When you look at the typical renewal process, when the deck page comes from the carrier's name's at the top of the deck, the carrier's name's on the envelope, the letters from the carrier, all that the agency gets is up in the corner. If you look closely enough, you'll see the name of the agency on the deck page, right? And nobody's going to look at their deck page other than go to the bottom, look at the big bold number to figure out what their premium is. So there's no reason for anyone to remember who the agency is.
Not unless you're adding value or you're staying in front of them. Like I always tell this story. We used an electrician at my home and the guy was fantastic, like super good, professional, clean, showed up in the evening. It wasn't an emergency. It was just more convenient for me. I got to pay by credit card and this was like 8 years ago. So like credit card transactions in your home were not necessarily as big of a thing. And I want to send him more work. I can't freaking find him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's done nothing to stay in touch with me. So it's like, I can't find him. I don't remember his name. He's losing out on referrals, all this fun stuff. And it's the same thing with your agency. So, from the time that a policy is sold, what's the plan to keep you in that transaction? And I think, Dave, this is where it gets to be like two schools of thought, right? Like there's the don't poke the sleeping bear school of thought, right? Like
don't talk to your clients.
Don't talk to them. They're going to want something.
They might remember who you are.
What if they want to be reshopped?
Right.
What if they start calling in with referrals? We're too busy.
Yeah.
That was time number 3, by the way. I used the word busy.
Yeah.
And and so it's like there's that
context. That wasn't you saying it. So that one I let it pass.
So then there's the clients who do stay involved. They email, they have email marketing campaigns, they're on social media, they're doing renewal calls, they drive value in that relationship. And, I'll tell you one thing, Dave, since doing these proactive renewal calls on the Apex retention program, I can actually now chart out after doing this for enough time. There's a difference in contact ratio. So for agencies that are actively engaging in, marketing to their customers, they see 50 to 60% hit ratio of contacts. They make a call, 60% of the time they hear back the renewal calls. One's not, you're sometimes down in the 30s. And I mean, like it's the only equalizer. When I first started doing it, I'm like, why is there such a difference in hit ratios? And we track all this. And then I started doing the analysis and I was like, the ones marketing to them, they pick up the phone because they know who they are. It's not like, who are you again? Right. Seekman Insurance. I'm sorry. What do you need? Is this a solicitation? It's like, no, I'm your agent.
Well, we just had that agent. We've been doing a training together, and they're getting people saying to them, "Please don't call me anymore," because we haven't set the expectation that when we call you proactively, it's actually a good thing. We're actually trying to enhance your experience. So if we haven't set that expectation in the past, there is a little bit of a hump there that you have to get over in order for customers when they see your caller ID not to go like running for the hills. They're like, oh, this is a reason why, here's something, maybe I should pick up the phone and have a conversation.
And then you just think about how much time your staff might spend call number 1, follow-up 2, follow-up 3, follow-up 4. It's another time trap. And, everybody's running around saying there's no time to do this stuff. Well, when you have to make 3 or 4 follow-ups to your clients to get something you need, that's the challenge.
Right. Well, and I think the experience starts right from the beginning. Our very first component when we do our Apex sales training, the very first thing is build rapport, because that is a unique experience that the customer can have. Like you were saying, remember your name. Well, I'm not going to remember your name if I launch immediately into, what year was your house built, or, what's your VIN number. there's no relationship there. So that's just straight transaction. I'm not going to remember that 3 years, 30 days, 3 days after I'm done with the process.
And I think that's a plague, right? So it's like we give good service, but I always think back, well, what's your definition of good service?
Right.
Because my definition of good service is different than yours. I had to take my car to go get service this morning, and they put me with I have like a relationship manager, Courtney. I love Courtney, but I got a different car. Something happened in my account and they flipped me over, and I was like, oh, no, I need Courtney.
Yeah. Right.
It's like, Courtney gets me.
Right.
When you find out you need new tires and it's $1,200, Courtney knows how to break that news to me.
Right. Exactly.
I don't want it from a stranger.
Right. I want the relationship there.
Yeah. And so it's like, one trick we tell agencies to do is have your receptionist, if you have one, just write down how many people know who to talk to when they call into your agency.
Right.
So are they just saying, I need to add a vehicle, or are they saying, I need to talk to Susie?
Right.
And I understand that there's some of that rub there because, maybe Susie's not the person that handles that, but then you at least know that there's the start of a relationship. And that's when you're really truly driving the best customer experience and the highest retention rates.
Right. I find it funny, every agency will say that they provide good service or the best service, but I kind of feel like, well, not everybody can be the same, right? There's some kind of scale. Like even if we go, like, how sometimes you go get a drink and like the medium is the small. So if we start the scale at good, then okay, fine. So everyone's good. But how do you escalate and how do you become amazing? How do you really become the best? And it really has to do with that relationship, that customer experience. And really what it comes down to is them remembering who you are.
But it's also reverse, right? So we've gone into agencies to launch the proactive renewal call program. And I know that you and I both have gotten this because we kind of call each other afterwards. We're like, I got it again. Which is the account manager that says that calling their customers is cold calling.
Right.
And that I'm always kind of perplexed. I'm not cold calling. I'm not hired to cold call.
Right.
And I was like, a call to your customer is the exact opposite of a cold call. And I always have to catch myself, be like, just breathe. There's a little misunderstanding here. We'll get through it. But if your team looks at it like calling their customers is, a cold transaction, that's the best place to start.
Right. Well, the other one that we always hear is when people think of it in terms of the account review and writing additional lines. And they say the same thing. I'm not a salesperson. I'm not here to sell. Well, how are you providing the best service if you're not doing a review of the policy? If you're not recommending higher limits, you're not recommending that they package the policy. A really hard time for somebody saying to me, I provide tremendous service, but I don't really look at the client's needs. I just help them with this one particular aspect of their insurance.
The transaction.
Yeah.
And I think the other half of it is that for a lot of agencies, they only call customers when something bad is happening.
Right.
Right. You're missing a payment. You're getting canceled. You've got to do a book roll because we're no longer using this company anymore. So now we have to talk to you. And so you're not interacting with them and saying, hey, great news, your rates went down.
Right.
So there's a rub there of, think about what kind of things you have to speak to your customers about, and 0% of them are positive.
Right, when you're calling out. Absolutely.
So it's not like, oh, great, my insurance agent's calling. Let me find out what kind of bad news we have today.
Right.
It's not a good look, The other thing I think too is that, another thing you have to keep an eye on is why are people returning our phone calls? If you really listen sometimes to how we speak to customers, we have insurance brain and we start using this terminology with our customers or clients that goes way over their head. And I use my mom as an example. So Mom, I don't know if you're listening or not, but this is no offense to you. Love you, Mom. If you start throwing around comprehensive, water sewer backup at my mom, she's just going to kind of say, okay, but she has no idea what that means.
Yeah.
My mom's almost 70. She bought insurance forever,
I always use the example, and now I hope my old boss isn't listening, but my first year in the industry, I was working for a carrier. I didn't know the difference between compulsory and comprehensive. It took me a year before I was like, oh, now I get it.
Right.
And I was in the industry. I mean, granted, I was only a year in, but I was here and I didn't understand the terms. Never mind trying to explain them to somebody outside.
So, you know, if they're feeling a little overwhelmed, they're just yesing you to death. That's not a good transaction either. That's not a good experience.
Yeah.
And then I also think we all try to be responsive, but Dave, how many times have you gone into an agency, sat at someone's desk to work on something, and you look in the management system, you see the suspenses like
red. Yep.
And you're just, I mean, that makes me cringe. And then the emails have 700 emails in there. I'm like, how do you know you're managing your client's expectation? There's definitely balls getting dropped. And I know for myself, I can't stand it when I have a service experience where they've missed my expectation that they set.
Yeah.
And so if you have all this stuff going on and you're not on top of your desk, great news. No one's going to want to talk to you because it's not pleasant.
Right. Well, I'm not going to listen to a thing that you have to say if you call me 3 days after you promised you were going to call me.
Right.
You've already lost me. It doesn't matter what you're calling me for. I'm going to disagree just because I want to disagree.
Well, then you're known as difficult to deal with. It's like, oh, I've got to talk to them. I don't really want to.
Yeah.
You know, and I've run into quite frequently actually lately. We were at an agency recently, and I've got a couple more being closed for lunch. I can't still get my head around that, to be honest with you.
Yeah. It's tough. You know, I think that we know when people are going to call. They're going to call first thing in the morning. They're going to call on Saturdays, and they're certainly going to call at lunchtime because they're all at lunch too. It's not that complicated. So I agree. I know in smaller agencies, it's really hard to coordinate, you know, the lunches with open times and all of that. I don't have a great solution for it other than, you know, just trying to figure out how to get through it, take earlier lunches, take late lunches. I'm not really sure what the solution is, but I think it's really hard to be closed at lunchtime.
I think it's hard because, you know, my mom, again, going back to my mom, she's a school teacher. She had lunch that she couldn't talk to you when you're open.
Right.
You know, You're basically saying, I'm sorry, we don't want to serve you.
Yeah.
And being an employer, I would appreciate my team having those kind of personal calls at their lunch break versus on my time.
Right. Absolutely.
And then the other thing is too, just having standards. I think every agent needs to have what I call like a service agreement, service standards. So, you know, if a call comes in the morning, what is the return time? To me, it's got to be before lunch. Call comes in the afternoon, at least just say, I have it. This is what I'm doing. We're working on it. Here you go. But you can't return a phone call the next day in this day and age. Well,
and I think that the idea is when you're on that first call, understand how long it's going to take. If you have to talk to an underwriter, you might have to set an expectation that, hey, I'm going to talk to an underwriter. I might not be able to speak to them, you know, today, but I'll call you by the end of the day and give you an update. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, this is a complicated quote. It's 3:00. I'd like to make sure I do this right. Set a time tomorrow. How does 3:00 again tomorrow work for you? How does 10:00 in the morning work for you? So it's really about setting the expectation, regardless of the time frame. Even if you're planning on getting back to them by 12, let them know that. So at 9:00, you say, okay, I'm going to get all my morning calls. I'm going to return them by 12:00. But make sure that you're setting that expectation with the client too, and then make sure you hit that expectation, because that's the other thing. It's one thing to set it, but you have to actually hit the expectation as well.
And put the buffer time in there. You know, I was on with an agency today, and it's like, hey, if you can't get back to them till Tuesday, tell them Wednesday, because life will happen.
Right.
Things will happen. And, you know, up here, we've had some crazy storms. So it's like, you know, you came into work Monday and you had to do claims.
Right.
So keep that in mind.
And you know the best way to not miss a follow-up call? First call resolution, right?
Because there's no follow-up call.
If we eliminate the follow-up, then we don't miss an expectation. I feel strongly in this on, you know, personal lines quoting when you're selling, but, you know, any type of simple scenario, you're better off putting a client on hold for a minute. If you need to call the carrier, you need to ask a question, you're better off keeping them engaged, even if that means putting them on hold and resolving that in a 10-minute call, instead of trying to rush them off the phone so that they only have a 5-minute call, and then you have to have a 5-minute call, you know, 6 hours later.
You just said something, quoting over the phone in personal lines. I hear that's taboo. I don't think that anybody I hear from agents across the country, that's absolutely impossible that could never happen, Dave. Can it happen?
I do. I don't know why it can't happen. Again, I do think that we talk about this in our FX sales training, but I think there's a lot of expectation setting you have to set up front in terms of making sure that the person doesn't think it's a 15-minute phone call. But as long as you set that expectation, you know how long it's going to take you, and the customer is willing to stay on for 30 minutes. Most people would rather. This goes back to the idea nobody wants to deal with their insurance. Most people would rather have a 30-minute phone call and be done with it than have a 15-minute phone call and then have to wait and have an additional conversation.
Well, I also think too, people have to get over, and I feel like, we'll have to have a whole podcast on this topic alone. I think people would love it, but sitting on the phone, using your rater, you get an estimate. Get people to buy into the estimate. Let them know if the information you've told us is accurate. You really don't have any claims. You really don't have any of this stuff. This is a ballpark figure. Would you like to move forward? You've already got a soft yes.
Right.
Now, if they're investing a half hour, guess what? It's a sure shot sale because they're not going to get to the end and be like, okay, I'm going to think about it. They're like, just do it. I'm done. I'm out.
I'm going to go call somebody else and spend another half hour with them. They're all done. They just want it to be completed.
Yeah. So if you solve their basic needs, you're good to go. And I just think what happens is so many times people are not comfortable quoting and talking to somebody on the phone. And they're definitely not comfortable with the idea of this is an estimate of your premium.
Yeah.
But we can go into that a little bit later. How about that?
Well, and that's one of those things. You just got to do it for a little while and then you get into it. But I think that's a great podcast for another time. I had one other thought too. When you were talking about the language that we use, it's not just the language, but it's also our voice tone and our voice inflection. And it's not just when we're actually having a conversation. I think this is vital when you're leaving that voicemail. Because most people aren't going to pick up, right? Because they either don't know who it is because their caller ID on their cell phone just has the number, or they know it's you and they don't really want to engage with their insurance agent at that time. So if they get a voicemail that's just like, hi, this is Dave calling from your agency. I got something to talk to you about. I'm not calling you back. But if I've got a relationship and I'm using positive language in a positive voice tone, I'm much more likely to call you back if you're talking to me like this than if you're talking to me like this. It's Tigger and Eeyore all over again, right? Absolutely.
And mention the carrier name and the agency name, right? Because if people have lost that, they're disjointed. They're like, from where?
Right.
I'm with Travelers. I don't know what you're talking about.
So and definitely say, we write your insurance, right?
Right.
It's not just I'm Dave from XYZ agency. You have to indicate to them, we write your home and your auto insurance so that they know, this is who that is.
I think it's perfect. Well, I think we've just dropped some wisdom bombs on how to get more people on. And, you might be thinking, oh, well, we're already so busy. Well, think about how busy you are with the follow-up situation. Every time you get a touch of busy, I know, I just said it a lot. Like I said, it's one of my core words. It's hard.
I hear you.
I can't use it on myself. I never say I'm busy. I always say I'm just very productive today.
Very productive. Yeah.
Very productive.
I gotcha.
I did have a call with an agency today, and we over Christmas time we actually had them. We pulled up the thesaurus, and everybody had to pick a different word other than busy. So it's like I'm popping today. I'm hustling. Yeah, it was great.
That's cool.
They need to stick with it a little bit more, but it was a good experience. So let's talk about, you got to download the ebook that we have on this topic, right? Because I think that this is a great thing to digest, share with your team. Huge opportunity.
Yeah. Who wrote that amazing ebook?
Somebody amazing?
Probably.
I might be on the podcast with him. Is his first name start with Dave, last name Seekman?
Mm-hmm. Rhymes with Seekman.
Yeah, so read Dave's latest inquiry. But here's the thing. We have something very cool to share with you guys, but I can't share it 100%. Our next podcast has a very top secret, very elusive, very exciting guest. But due to non-disclosures, security reasons, national security issues, I can't disclose it.
Compliance.
Is it what?
TSA compliance.
TSA compliance, yes. Background checks.
Yes.
Just due to the, we do not want all of the fans at our office doorstep. We just can't maintain that. We don't have a back door. We don't have a green room, but they've made a special decision to come on, and it's an exciting time because we're gonna have a very exciting announcement during that one. So I'm so super stoked. So you got to check that out. I can't tell you anymore. Probably said too much. As always, if you guys have any requests for podcasts, give us a shout out. Leave us a comment on any of our social channels. Shoot us an email, whatever you got to do. We want to cater these to you. So Dave and I just bump into topics that we see all the time and try to customize them for our viewers' listening pleasure. I think that if we can all kind of get together, do a better job on our customer experience, we're going to see a much better connection rate with our customers.
Absolutely.
So Dave, I want to thank you again for hopping on our podcast. Stay tuned for our top secret guest, and check out our other podcasts out there. But we'll be back for podcast 5 next month. Thanks, guys.